It's time for another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas, the podcast covering the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life in general here in the Ozarks. Whether you are considering a move to this area or trying to learn more about the place you call home, we've got something special for you. Here's our host, Randy Wilburn.
Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and I'm excited to be with you as always. I am sitting here in the Furman Garner Performance Studio here at KUAF, which is technically one of the homes of I Am Northwest Arkansas because we are so fortunate to get to use this wonderful facility to record a lot of the episodes that we do. So I always like to give KUAF a shout out. I always want to encourage our listeners to also listen to National Public Radio and your local NPR affiliate as often as you can when you're not listening to I Am Northwest Arkansas, whether you're out on the boat, on Beaver Lake, or out on a run on the trail, or ripping up some mountain bike trails here in Northwest Arkansas. Whatever you're doing when you're listening to this podcast, we really appreciate it. And I have a special episode for you today. One of the things you hear me talk about quite a bit is I get to connect with a lot of people in this community. Again, when I created this podcast, it was simply to meet some new people and to learn some things. And more importantly, to create the podcast that didn't exist when I moved here more than a decade ago. And so it has kind of taken on a life of its own. And I get to meet a lot of great people. And this individual that is our guest today, his name is Bret Raymond. He is the co-founder and CEO of PacShack, as well as the general manager for Neighborly. And so this is an interesting episode where we're going to talk a little bit about the origins of PacShack and how Bret got involved and also Neighborly's story. And we're just going to talk a little bit about Bret. But the thing that I like about his story is that it's not unique to Northwest Arkansas in the sense that we have a lot of people here that have found community in creation. And I really want to encourage you to listen to this episode and, let it seep in, because there are a lot of you out there that are hyper creative or maybe more creative than you realize, but you just haven't connected with the right people in order to unleash that creativity. And so I hope that Bret's story today serves not just as a reminder, but as a spark to let those creative juices start to flow, because you are more than you know. And so I want to encourage you with that today. And so this is not a pep talk, but more of an introduction for Bret Raymond. But without further ado, I want to welcome Bret Raymond to the podcast. How are you doing?
Thanks, Randy. Great. Wonderful. It's great to be here today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So listen, why don't you we usually ask about your superhero origin story. I would love for you just to give a little bit about your background and talk a little bit about PacShack and how Neighborly got started. I know they're kind of two different things, so you can start with PacShack and then jump into Neighborly, and we'll make this a full circle conversation. We'll get to cover quite a few bases.
Absolutely. Well, I'm a CPA by trade, and my background was in audit and doing financial analysis. But in the 90s, I had the opportunity to travel to Romania just after their revolution, and I had never been any place like that. And it just really changed my life. I made several trips to Romania in the 90s. And to make a longer story shorter, my wife and I ended up moving to Uganda in the late 90s.
Okay.
And working with a mission team and doing sustainable economic development. And that really put me on a different trajectory with my career, still applying all of the things I had learned along the way, just in a different context. And then through the next decade, I had the opportunity to work in different places overseas and domestically.
Okay.
And one of those opportunities was to work in Rwanda. A friend of mine and I had started a company called Mana Nutrition that produces a therapeutic food for kids with severe acute malnutrition. And my family moved to Rwanda, and I did the efficacy study for that product. And I saw kids over those 6 weeks who were treated with this just totally transformed, and not just the kids, but their families. And it really opened my eyes a lot to the impact of the right food and the right nutrition at the right time in a person's life. And because of that experience, when we returned to Northwest Arkansas, I knew I just wanted to stay involved in food and food production and helping people that needed it. And that's really how the PacShack emerged, was from that foundation.
Okay. All right. And then that started back in 2013. Is that correct?
It did. And it started asking questions when we came back from Rwanda just about local hunger and nutrition in Northwest Arkansas.
Yeah.
And having conversations with anyone who would listen or take a conversation. And some of those were larger groups and some were one-on-ones. But really the community identified what the needs were and where the gaps were. And as we presented different ideas on how to address it, the community really helped co-create what would become the PacShack and what would emerge as the PacShack.
So, wow, there's a whole lot I want to unpack there. Well, first of all, let me actually go back because the Africa piece is interesting. I think I told you I just spent about 2 weeks in Uganda earlier this summer prior to us sitting here and recording this. And I got to go to Kigali as well in Rwanda, which has changed a lot since the genocide. It's changed dramatically. Like everybody that I talked to was like, this isn't the Rwanda from the 90s. It's a much different place now.
Absolutely.
It is growing by leaps and bounds. And so, but I'm curious to know, what was the one thing about your time in Africa that you exported here to the U.S. as it applies to PacShack and how that got off the ground?
Well, I learned a lot from African entrepreneurs.
Okay. They're very creative.
They're very creative and
resilient.
And they never have just one thing going on.
Right.
You know, you've got to have 5 things going on because you don't know which one of them could fail at any point or whatever. So I learned a lot about the ability to multitask, but in a way that would be consistent. And so I see that for myself, how that's applied with the PacShack and then as Neighborly came out of it.
Yeah.
Of how those were so connected, but one was the cause of another. So being able to work on 2 different things that are related has created a lot of synergies. But there's no one more resilient than an African entrepreneur in my mind. Like I'm just, I think every one of them could teach a graduate level business course.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's so funny because I spent a bunch of time, and shout out to bold creators, but I spent a bunch of time with a number of Ugandan entrepreneurs, and they all had their hands in multiple things, which didn't make me feel bad when I came back. I was telling my wife, I'm like, yeah, I don't feel bad. I mean, I'm doing this I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. I have a hyperlocal job board called Onboard NWA. I now have this new thing called Find It NWA, which is just a hyperlocal business directory. I don't think there's anything wrong with multiple sources of revenue. I mean, we've heard about multiple streams of income for a million years. Those of you that read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, anybody that read Michael Gerber's E-Myth about working on your business, not in it. I mean, there are just so many different things that come to mind. But certainly what I was most impressed about, just like what you said, and I concur, is just the resiliency and the intellect of the African entrepreneur. And I think what happens is, even here in the States, sometimes we have a misperception about how cultivated and how well that these folks are doing over there. And so, yes, I get it that the average person might be maybe struggling, or you look at what somebody's making on a daily basis and say, man, $1 or $2 a day, that's not a lot of money. It's just different levels there. So you have a totally different experience. But I think if nothing else, as Americans, when we go out abroad, especially when we go to a continent like Africa, which is so rich with resources and people, it does give you a different perspective on things.
It sure does. And listening to some of the previous podcast episodes that you've done, access to capital, right?
It's everything.
Like, this is a major thing. And so you have individuals who have every bit of the same, or if not greater capacity than an entrepreneur may have here, but they may lack access to capital, or they may lack some of the social structures that we have in terms of safety nets or legal options and just a legal framework in which to operate. Yeah. So it's an extraordinary place. I said when we lived in Uganda and Rwanda, they were entrepreneurs' playgrounds.
Yeah.
Like, it's so much fun to try.
True. It's true.
And to make a difference.
But the cool thing about that is that it impacted you.
Yeah.
Because it gave you, it kind of lit that fire for you, right? And then you probably came back here and was like, wow, with all the resources I have at my disposal, there shouldn't be any reason why I can't get something off the ground and really grow it.
I feel that way in Northwest Arkansas.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Especially in the food sector with what we're doing and now with Neighborly at retail, it's ours to fail at.
Yeah.
Because there's every imaginable resource in the community that if we need help, it's raising our hands and asking for help and looking for those relationships and networks of people. And in our community, as you know, I mean, the people are so generous, right? If you ask a question, someone's going to respond and help point you in the right direction.
Yeah. No, that goes without saying. I will say that PacShack, the origins of PacShack, one of the benefits of what you guys have done is that you guys have been able to create 50 million meals. I want people to hear that. I didn't say 50,000 or 500,000 or 5 million, 50 million with an M.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, it is a big deal. It speaks to a couple of things for me. Number one is the need.
Yeah.
So the last decade, we've seen ups and downs, and the last 4 years have been 4.5 years now have been pretty challenging, of course, starting in March of 2020. And I'm not going to say it.
Yeah, I know, right? I've tried to put that out of the back of my mind. So,
but then that followed up with just this crippling inflation, especially for families that are at the margin.
Yeah.
There's no margin. And so then when prices continue to go up and income does not, you're just like, how do families respond to that? And it's hard to understate it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's extremely difficult for so many families who have to make difficult decisions and who in some cases have to trade down for things that they wouldn't otherwise choose. But because of that impact on the pocketbook, you have to make the changes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So if you had to, for our listeners, if you had to describe PacShack in one sentence, what would be the best way to describe it?
Yeah. So the PacShack brings people together for these crazy fun feed the funnel parties to pack thousands of meals for local neighbors in need.
Okay. And that's local neighbors anywhere.
It's anywhere. We've worked in 43 states now and with over 230,000 people. But when the meals are packed, they stay in those local communities. So last week we were in Seattle, Phoenix, South Dakota, and here in Arkansas. And the meals that were packed in those places stayed in those communities to help neighbors in need. And what's cool about that, one, is it gives the community ownership for their own community.
Yeah.
And they're responding to the needs of their community. Some people are like, well, who do those meals go to? And they go to an organization or organizations that know how to put them to use most effectively in their community. So it might be a food pantry. It could be, a hot meal program. It could be a weekend backpack program for kids. It's however that organization is serving their community. So we're not dictating it. It's all owned by the community.
Wow. And I think when you solve the issue at the local level like that, I think it has a much greater chance to take hold and really, make for something to really happen.
Yeah. Our greatest hope in our communities is each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our neighbors taking care of neighbors. And I often say that, that's how our grandparents grew up, right? Like that's how we heard these stories of how people would take care of each other. And there were these legendary poundings, and that wasn't just like if you had an older brother and you got pounded, but, people in need, if there was a family in need, neighbors would pound that neighbor with a pound of sugar, a pound of flour, a pound of potato, whatever it was.
Right.
And those were known as poundings, and neighbors just came together to help one another. And I still see that character, especially in smaller communities, but even in a region like Northwest Arkansas, we're still small enough that we are very neighborly.
Yeah, we really are. And I always remember my grandparents telling me the story about how they survived the Depression, which was debilitating for everybody. I don't care who you were, black, white, it didn't matter. The Depression didn't care because it exacted its pound of flesh on everyone, but it was because of that, the resiliency of those local communities and of people sharing, like you said. I mean, like my grandmother said, we were never hungry. If we didn't have something, our neighbor had it. If they had it, we had it.
That's exactly right.
Totally different mindsets. So.
Yeah.
And we need to get back to that. I think obviously, I could go on a rant about how the changing dynamic of technology has actually, even though theoretically we are closer together because I can reach out to you much faster. I can talk with you by video on my phone now, but we're even further apart. And so there are opportunities for us to come together. So what you're doing, I think, with PacShack is really important. And I would encourage anybody to get involved. And we'll talk a little bit later on, and we'll make sure we put in our show notes ways for people to learn about how PacShack is operating within their locale. But I would imagine that you serve organizations like the NWA Food Bank, and maybe, do you know Monique Jones from St. James Food Pantry?
I've spoken with her.
Okay.
But I haven't met her in person.
Yeah, she's dynamic. You guys are kindred spirits for sure. So we'll have to make sure you guys get fully connected because, what you're doing with PacShack is just in line with what she's trying to do. And I worked with her during the pandemic, and it was eye-opening to say the least, because what I've said about Northwest Arkansas, as well off of an area as we are, we still have real issues when it comes to food insecurity. Like, it's real.
Yes.
Like real. Mm-hmm. And I tell people that all the time. And then I got involved with, which is the reason why we got connected, is because I got involved with my local co-op that I have been a member of since I moved here in 2014. And that co-op is called Ozark Natural Foods. I am now on the board of that co-op. And one of the local farmers who serves Ozark's Natural Foods and who has done so for several years is Genevieve Valines from the Valines Farm. Mm-hmm. And they produce some really great food that they do provide to not just Ozark Natural Food, but to other local places as well. That's right. But that's how we connected, because she was actually sampling your new business,
yes,
which I want to talk about as well, which is Neighborly. And it just seems like Neighborly was almost like a natural evolution out of the hard work and time and effort that you put into PacShack.
Yeah, it totally is. And even, I looked back at a 2013 PowerPoint about the PacShack, and, the PacShack is structured as a nonprofit, but our mindset was we were a food producer. And so we've always thought about it from that perspective. So we wanted to produce great products that people enjoyed, that were nutritious, that would make a difference in their lives. And the way that PacShack works, is a people coming together. So our production model is, as hands. It's a physical model,
right? And
distribution is through food assistance organizations. But we always envisioned that, we could also have a production environment, and those distribution channels could be wholesale and retail. And so that was always in our mind. And we started working toward that in 2018. And we were working with an organization to bring products to market. As it got very close to being on shelf, this crazy thing happened in March of 2020, and all new product introductions were suspended. Yeah, it changed it, and I would say there was nothing great about the pandemic. Yeah, there are only good things that came out of it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And for us, that was one of those things. So our product launch got nixed by an organization. And so we revisioned what we wanted to do with this. And so we took it and we said, okay, for Neighborly, we want these meals to be totally clean label, plant-based, allergen, gluten, dairy-free. And some of those attributes really sprung out of our own family's needs.
Yeah.
And so I've had different family members with different health conditions over the years that required dietary changes in our families. And in every instance, our family got healthier.
Yeah.
And so we decided, if we're going to produce a product for others, then let's make it what we would eat.
Absolutely.
Right? So we wanted to take the world's most loved meal, rice and beans, and combine that with the world's most extraordinary flavors. And that's Neighborly. So it's really adding some innovation and some creativity and, dare I say, flavor to the rice and bean category that's been rather status quo for a long, long time.
Listen, I got to tell you, and that was the thing. I remember I actually just got introduced to your product by Genevieve at our annual members meeting that ONF had just a couple of weeks ago prior to recording this. And shout out to ONF again. If you're not a member of ONF, it's the only food co-op in the state of Arkansas. You need to be a member, because then you could be at events like the event that I was at, and you could enjoy some of Neighborly's delights. But I was blown away. I had the Louisiana style red beans and rice, and it was to die for. It was perfectly flavored, and it was actually a little spicy. And I like my things spicy. And my wife her family's from Trinidad and Tobago. So, rice and beans are a staple in a Caribbean diet. And they make them a lot of different ways, pigeon peas, you name it. But, this reminded me of that. And there was a certain comfort level. And even my wife had some, and she was like, oh, this is really good. And I was like, would you make this on a regular basis? She said, absolutely. It would just save her some time.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing, right? Because when she cooks with love. And when people try these, I think they'll feel a little bit of that love in terms of like, these aren't just thrown together and it's just not some Lowry seasoning salt or something like that. I mean, you took time. I mean, you've got several different types. You have tiki masala, black beans and rice, Thai, yellow curry, red beans and rice, Southwest chili, black. I mean, I'm getting hungry right now. And then of course, Louisiana style red beans and rice, and they're one pot servings. So you can get 5 servings out of one bag and they are really, really good.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. First of all,
that's my commercial for you.
No, I appreciate that. And we'll replay that over and over. No, I had a friend from the World Food Program and he would say, nothing is nutritious until it's eaten. And that's always stuck with me.
I like that. That's a good quote.
We want to make things that people want to eat. And if we're going to do that, why not have it do some good as well? So the product itself, I mean, rice and beans have so many benefits as a combination. And we could go on just about the benefits of rice and beans. I mean, here we sit in the largest rice producing state in the country, in Arkansas.
In the world, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're producing almost half of the U.S. rice right here in Arkansas. So we're using a local product, supporting local farmers with this product. And then those beans add the protein and great fiber to it. And together, those make all of the amino acids that one needs. So, I mean, it's a perfect foundation for a meal. And then when we put that with clean label ingredients in the seasoning, it's just extraordinary. And that seasoning is also local here to Northwest Arkansas.
Oh,
so that comes from Springdale. So, we're really thrilled with the product itself. And when we've, had taste tests against other similar products that you find in the grocery stores, it wins every time. It's just the flavor is so fresh. It just pops. It's it's perfectly seasoned. Our product development teams have done a phenomenal job of putting these together. And it's, these 4 we hope aren't the end. We still have a global map of world flavors that we want to fill in. So maybe some sneak previews of an Italian white bean and rice meal that would be coming with a strong Tuscan influence, a Jamaican jerk, black bean and rice. And then I think my holy grail will be, and I don't know if I should say this publicly, but I'm shooting for this. I want Kung Pao red beans and rice. I just need a big check mark on that one. I just personally, I would love that one.
I love that. You are speaking my language, especially with the Jamaican jerk, and that would really be tasty. You mentioned previously about getting into some stores, and how have you found, I mean, as you created these, you've already had some practice with putting meals together. Was it your thought that we would have a challenge getting into different stores and the like, as far as that's concerned? Or were you even thinking that way?
Well, it was the idea for sure. So we started selling online. And I was like, I'd like to present these to some stores. And the first one I went to was actually O&F. Those are natural foods.
Yeah.
And they were the first ones to see it and say, yes, we'll take it. And it's still stocked at O&F. So another big shout out to O&F. And to be honest, Randy, I'd never done any of this kind of work before. But in Northwest Arkansas, there are a few people who have. So I just started calling up friends and asking for help. Okay, what do I do when I go and meet with a buyer? What's the language? What do I need to be thinking about? How do I speak? Help me understand this. And people, as would happen, were super kind. Yeah. I mean, I would even have to back up and say, shout out to the Mars Agency, because they came on when we were envisioning this project and helped us with all of the branding for this.
Yeah.
Because they believed in it and wanted to be a part of it.
I love that. So would you say that it would be a fair observation to say, in the same way that somebody, and follow my thinking here, in the same way that somebody that's starting or getting a tech business off the ground might benefit from maybe locating themselves in Silicon Valley, where all of the tech stuff is happening, right? Yeah. That's the hub or the center of tech. But we are the center of CPG, or consumer product goods, like across the board. So whatever it is, it could be wrapping paper or it could be rice and beans. I mean, you can literally throw a rock in Northwest Arkansas and hit a CPG expert.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think that a lot of people, as a matter of fact, I have friends that have benefited from just being in this backyard. It is the perfect playground for a CPG entrepreneur. And
100%.
And you are a CPG entrepreneur with what you're doing with Neighborly.
Yeah, it is. And the amount of expertise, and not just expertise, the world's top expertise.
Yeah.
It's just amazing what's here. And so I asked a friend who works at Walmart if he would take a look at Neighborly just from an industry perspective. And would he be willing to give me some pointers and just, and I wasn't thinking I want to get this in Walmart right out of the gate.
Because you're like, that's Walmart. It's big.
And we're just setting up our production facility in Cave Springs and 15 minutes into the meeting, he's like, well, we'd love to have this in Walmart.
How did you feel when he said that?
Yeah, shocked. And, thrilled and terrified.
Yeah.
Like, wait a minute. That wasn't the point of this meeting. I was just looking for some advice. And then, it took a little.
Did you have him taste it at the time?
No. Just it was the story. It was the branding. It was the message behind it. It's the, an aspect of this that we haven't really touched on. This is structured like Newman's Own.
Sure.
So for those who may not know about Newman's Own brands, but their products give 100% of profits to organizations that help kids.
Yep, which is why I buy them to this day.
Which is an amazing thing.
And Paul Newman was a great guy,
Absolutely.
As an aside, I heard a story the other day, which I was like, wow, and this is, I'm going off on a tangent here, so the listeners can bear with me. But Paul Newman gave up a portion of his salary for a movie that he was in when he found out that Susan Sarandon was being paid less money than he was.
Oh, wow.
Which I said, that kind of scans with the kind of person Paul Newman was and his whole focus with his Paul Newman products. But I've literally been buying Paul Newman products since day one because of that mission.
Yeah. And to date, over $600 million have been generated for organizations that help kids.
Yeah.
Through that vision. And so we're really inspired by Newman's Own and by the brand and how they were able to do something for the good of humanity and to help tens and hundreds of thousands of kids. So we thought, well, could we do the same thing and help organizations that are addressing food insecurity?
Yeah.
And so we've committed 100% of profits to feed neighbors in need through Neighborly Food Co.
So then you guys are operating Neighborly are you guys operating as a B Corp or as a nonprofit?
Well, it's currently just an LLC.
Okay.
So as we get some years under our belt, then we can apply for B Corp status and go that direction for sure. And actually.
Was that your thought?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell the listeners what a B Corp is? Because that's a newer entity that a lot of people aren't familiar with.
Yeah. B Corps are really designed as a for-profit company with social impact at its heart. And so you have different requirements to meet that B Corp status. But what it allows is investment so that you can scale an organization, which is sometimes the challenge of being structured as a nonprofit is you don't necessarily get that same kind of interest in investment. And so the B Corp can still be super attractive to investors. And we've seen so many great B Corps that are out there now. And a lot of times you don't even know because it might launch the brand, but what keeps the brand going is the quality of the product. And, whether it's a consumable like a food product or another type of product, people are going to come back for the quality.
Yeah. No, listen, that goes without saying. So we start out with PacShack.
Yeah.
You morph into creating Neighborly, which is kind of taking on a life of its own.
Yeah.
And from one simple meeting, how quickly were you guys actually in Walmart stores?
So it took about 14 months.
Okay.
From that, we want this in the store.
People sometimes think it's once you get the yes or they ask, it's like all of a sudden you show up on shelves the next day, but it doesn't work that way.
No, we've been getting a little bit, just a small bit of the behind the scenes of how the world's largest retailer does this. And oh my goodness, I feel like I am starting a brand new career. I've been making the deliveries to the distribution center of our product because I want to understand every bit of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
From an entrepreneur standpoint, I would go back to what Andrew Carnegie and Sam Walton and so many of the great entrepreneurs have said is you've got to know every cost in your system, right? So I need to know exactly how much it costs in time, in distance, in shipping, in logistics to make a delivery.
Yeah.
Because it influences everything that's on the shelf. And there's nobody doing it better than Walmart. And I can tell you, we go to DC 6094 out on Regional Airport Road. And the first time I went, Randy, I was sweating. I'd never deliver. Literally like sweat pouring down my face.
I know exactly what you're talking about. So,
and I walked in and fortunately the logistics people had phoned ahead to the DC folks to let them know I was coming and I was a newbie. And from the time I went through the security check all the way in, they were just like, you've got this. Here's what you need to do. They were just so kind and helpful because they want me to be successful as a supplier. But also everyone is excited because it's a local business actually manufacturing, producing this product right here in Northwest Arkansas.
I'm glad you mentioned that because sometimes I think, and I get it. I honestly didn't have the same degree of excitement and really honestly respect for Walmart until I moved here and really recognized, right? Because a lot of times Walmart gets a bad rap sometimes. And granted, like any large company, I mean, Walmart is a Fortune 1, meaning that they're one of one. I mean, they're one of the largest employers in the world. I mean, that just creates its challenges have challenges. So to be able to overcome that and do what they do and take that tack, but you're not the first person that has told me about their experience working internally with Walmart, especially as a vendor to Walmart. And that says a lot, right, about the organization. And you're absolutely right. I've read Sam Walton's biography several times, and he was a master at staying in his business. And he learned that from Saul Price, who started Price Club, Andrew Carnegie. You mentioned all the great people that were really big on one of the simplest ways to be successful in business is to drill down on where your costs are. Yeah.
That's the only thing you can control.
That is. And as an accountant, I'm sure you can appreciate that. Exactly, I know I'm speaking your language. So
So to that end, I would say, we can't do anything to control what happens at the shelf.
Yeah.
That's the consumer choice. Now I would say, please go out and buy Neighborly Food Co. when you find it in the 40 Walmart stores around Northwest Arkansas right now. But that's totally out of our control. But what we can do is work with our suppliers, cast a vision, help them to buy into what they're a part of. And so, that's a big part of our job is educating our suppliers on what it is that they're doing to make a difference.
Yeah.
And how every penny they save us makes it possible to save more families, more money,
right,
to be able to afford healthy, nutritious food.
And that's the key thing, healthy and nutritious food, which is really important. I do have a question for you because, I know that all that glitters isn't gold. There's always going to be challenges. But what were some of the biggest challenges you faced while in this? I would say you're still in the early stages of scaling things with Neighborly. But what have you faced? What challenges have you faced? And what have been the biggest aha moments or learnings from those challenges?
Well, I would say the biggest challenge in launching a food brand is just awareness.
Yeah.
Trying to create momentum. And our strategy is really to get the product into as many people's hands as possible. So, we get hit with all of these different ideas of, if you do this and do that, you'll grow 10x and whatever. And I guess we've just taken maybe a slow food approach to this and just said, let's just get more and more people trying this in whatever way that we can. And we find that as people try it, they start talking about it. And so rather than us just talking about it and doing big promotions or marketing campaigns that just talk about the product, let's just get others to talk about it because they've tried it.
Yeah.
And so that's just a simple kind of old school thing of the more of these we can get out to people for them to try, the more we find they keep going back. And we see that online. We've been selling online for about a year and a half, and we'll see people who the first time they order, 3 or 4 bags, and the next time they're ordering a box of 12 and they're sharing with their friends. People are going into the store and buying 1 bag, and the next time they're getting both varieties that are available. So yeah, it's just that slow word of mouth. I don't know that there are shortcuts. And in fact, I believe there aren't shortcuts of just doing the right thing, and people have to buy into it and they have to make a different choice. This is a new thing.
Yeah.
And, most of us make the same choices over and over. And so when something new comes along, it's a leap.
It is
for people to make a switch, right?
It is. And I think that's one of the things. And as I'm looking at your packaging and everything, and the packaging is really simple, but I love kind of how your mission or what you're trying to do is very clear. Right on the back, it says 100% of profits feed neighbors in need. 100% of profits from your purchase provide meals for neighbors in need through organizations that address food security. And below is one example of this support. Talk a little bit about, some of the 1 or 2 cool stories that have come out of doing this neighborly? Maybe you've connected with some people that said, hey, these have really been a lifesaver for us. Mm-hmm. We couldn't find, again, this is no knock on Hamburger Helper, but there's got to be better options out
That's
there.
Exactly right.
And I'm like, when I look at this, I'm just like, man, I have a staple here that I can provide, a better, healthier alternative when I'm feeding, because I have 3 boys, 19, 18, and 14. Y'all pray for me because
they will eat you out of house and home.
They are literally eating me out of house and home. I cannot keep a box of cereal for more than 2 or 3 days. But something like this, this stuff sticks to your bones. Mm-hmm. It tastes good. What are some of the stories that you've heard from people that have kind of taken this on and have made neighborly part of their regimen?
Yeah, from a local impact, because it ties in with our mission. When the tornadoes hit Northwest Arkansas several months ago, we were able to donate several cases of neighborly to the Salvation Army mobile kitchen that was working in Rogers.
Okay.
And so they were able to get those meals out, and they said the feedback from that was amazing. Like, people were coming to the mobile kitchen just expecting something, but they got the tikka masala, black beans and rice, and they were like, what in the world? And like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
That was amazing. So then we followed up with another donation to the Salvation Army in Fayetteville to their kitchen. Yep. And then we asked them would they do customer surveys on this. And so we got such great feedback from the people who enjoyed it as a hot meal at the Salvation Army. Wow. And so, again, trying to get that customer feedback. Everybody wants to eat something that tastes good. Like, there's not a person that just says, I don't really care. Just give me something. Like, given a choice, let me have something that tastes good, right?
Sure.
Consumer feedback that, like, across the board, we've shipped meals to, I think, like 41 states now, just online.
Yep.
So the word has gotten out that way. And the feedback that just keeps coming back is, thank you so much. There's one that's on our social media, because this lady took the time to actually send us an email. And she said, these are the best rice products I've ever had. And she said, it's not only that they taste great, but they hit our family's dietary needs.
Yeah.
Right. So with these meals being, again, clean label, so there's no artificial anything, there are no chemicals, no preservatives in these meals, you can feel really great about it. But then they're allergen free. There are 9 classes of allergens now.
It's crazy.
And
it's crazy.
And you're just like, 9 classes of allergens. But we're making these amazing products that are allergen free, gluten free, which again, that hits home with us and our family, and they're dairy free. And so you think, how can you make a Thai yellow curry that's dairy free?
Yeah.
And that doesn't have coconut in it?
Right.
We've nailed it. I mean, it's an extraordinary meal. So, the feedback that we continue to get is just overwhelming. And it's humbling, because Randy, I wake up, and I don't know if a lot of entrepreneurs do this, but I'm like, but what if this isn't good?
Yeah.
What if my product isn't good? Whether it's a tech product or a or a hard good or whatever. But
I ask myself that question all the time. I'm like, what if my podcast stinks? Right. What if it's like?
And I think there's that maybe natural fear of, like, I've been deceiving myself or something.
Sometimes it's imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Clothed in, it's just kind of, that happens. It does happen sometimes.
So we get really great feedback. It's delightful to hear from customers who are just like, we've had other rice and bean products, and we had this couple drive from Huntsville, Arkansas to Cave Springs to find us.
Wow.
Because they were like, well, we saw this was made in Cave Springs, so we just decided to drive over and find you guys because we wanted to buy more of it.
Oh, my
and they're
goodness.
like, we've had these other products that we find in the store, but there's nothing that compares to the neighborly rice and beans. And we're just like, wow, that's amazing.
That is amazing.
People take the time to do that.
As I'm sitting here, and we've had some amazing organizations that really do make a difference in the community. And I'm thinking of like New Beginnings, Seven Hills, Returning Home. There's some, when people come out of incarceration, they have a place to come to kind of help them resettle into society.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, man, like all of those folks could use neighborly, these rice mixes and benefit from them.
Yeah.
So
we get college students who like these as well, because, this is, depending on the retailer, $250 to $350 a bag for 5 servings.
Yeah.
And these are 5 1-cup servings. These aren't like 5 little bitty servings. When we make this at Neighborly, 4 or 5 of us will have this for lunch with one bag.
That's it.
So it makes for a great thing. And then you can do other fun things too. Like I love the Southwest chili, black beans and rice as a base on Taco Tuesday.
Okay.
Like that's what I like on my taco. And I'm not a big meat eater. So
Yeah.
I like that. And then put some cheese and guacamole
I
on
love
it or whatever.
that. Yeah.
Use the dairy-free thing. But I guess you can always get some dairy-free cheese. But I just love that as the base of a taco. And there are different ways, if you're a Louisiana red beans and rice person, you can take that and you can add your shrimp or your andouille, whatever you want to do to it, to customize it.
Sure.
So it's easy to do those things as well.
So you can doctor all of these, which I think is really, really key. I think I don't want you to miss what Bret is saying here. So you're not just subject to what's in this bag. What's in this bag is the foundation of something even better, which is creating like a really healthy lifestyle alternative when it comes to eating, and even eating kind of quickly, right? Because you can just cook. Obviously, these cook right on the oven. Can you cook these in a pressure cooker or?
Probably so. I know we've done it in instant pots, and
that's kind of what I meant.
Yeah,
so
in
that's
an
like
instant pot, you can do that. We've got microwave instructions, slow cooker. Any way that you cook rice. The beans that are in here rehydrate in the same amount of time it takes to cook the rice that's in there.
Sure.
So any way that you cook rice, I think you could do it. You probably just have to adapt the water as you normally would for a meal. But
I love that. And it's ready in 30 minutes.
Ready in 30 minutes.
Which it says right on the package.
When you've got a family that you're getting home at 6 o'clock at night, and the easy thing for a lot of people, right, is to stop by and pick up something.
Yeah.
Whether it's from a restaurant or it's the convenience store or whatever it is. Understandably, people are busy. They're tired. I know when I get off work, but in the amount of time that it takes you to stop and do that and spend $20-$25 on some food, you could spend a few dollars and get a healthy alternative that tastes great, that's going to be ready in the same amount of time. And so it's convenient, affordable, delicious, and it doesn't have all that stuff in it that you don't want in your food.
Yeah, well, listen, I think that it makes a big difference when you have options, right? And I think that is hugely important. So I think that, my thought simply is that folks need to try this out. And I want to encourage them that they can find Neighborly in local Walmarts here in Northwest Arkansas. Yep. You can find it at Ozark Natural Foods, which is right there at 380 North College, at the corner of College and North College and Lafayette. You can't miss it. So there's a lot of different options that you have available. Yep. And so I want to encourage folks to take advantage of that and check out and support Neighborly and what Bret's doing. Bret, you've already mentioned and you talked about your personal experience and how that impacted and encouraged you to start Neighborly. What would be your encouragement to anybody listening that's kind of like maybe they've in their hearts have had a design or an idea about getting something off the ground, whether it's food related or otherwise? What advice or encouragement would you have for them?
Find some mentors.
Yeah.
Ask people questions, learn from as many people as you can. I was listening to this another podcast and they were talking about Mr. Beast and the internal memo that was leaked.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And he says, when you're tasked with something or you want to do something, find a consultant.
Yeah.
There's so many people who know about some aspect of what you're thinking about.
Yeah.
And it's go out and learn and learn and learn and never stop learning. And then, at the end of the day, it's great to have an idea, but take action. Like there's a big leap of faith and courage and
which you took.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
honestly, think about it. If you didn't, even if you didn't take the time, because I know a lot of times people would say, oh, well, Walmart's too big. They wouldn't even be interested in me. What if you had never asked that guy for any feedback or advice or just to run it by him?
Yeah.
Do you think you'd be where you are right now?
No, we'd be someplace different.
Yeah.
But I'd tell you, because he said that and gave us the opportunity, like I've got two hands in my back pushing me, like, and I feel a huge responsibility to learn.
Sure.
And not to try to bluff my way through this, right? So the other big thing I would say is if you're starting something and you're trying to meet somebody's need, a customer's need, you cannot have an ego in it because you have to do everything from the perspective of the customer.
Oh, yeah.
How do I serve that customer? And if I think I know what they want, but that's not what they want, then I have to pivot my thinking to what the market needs and what that customer needs. And so I think there's just really not any room for an entrepreneur to have an ego.
No, you can't have an ego, and you must, as I think one of the things that Bret is describing is to have a really open feedback loop where you can get feedback and you don't take it as criticism, but you take it as additional information.
That's exactly right.
Data points that can help inform how you go and change things as you move forward.
This will make it better.
Yeah.
But you have to start. So you have to put something out there.
Yep.
And then iterate quickly. What do they say? Fail fast.
Yes.
Put it out there, fail fast, improve it, change it, do something different. Our first meals weren't this that we were envisioning until the pandemic hit. And then we revisioned it, right? So you learn, you pivot, you change, but you've got to constantly be learning and asking and having your ears wide open.
You really do. And I mean, you have kind of nailed it on the head. I mean, in terms of what you have to do. This has kind of been like another masterclass. We've been putting out some pretty good masterclasses lately on just getting something started because it's not as hard as you think. And I just encourage people to get out there and get going. I think what I have found is that there's so many people that have really good ideas, but those ideas are sitting around inert because you're not adding water to it. You're not putting it out there into the world to let people see it. And I'm thankful that you took a mission that you already had over your life through PacShack and then decided to put Neighborly out there. And it's beautiful the way the two kind of work together. And
it is. And we've been inspired. There are some other brands I just give shout outs to because there's Hank's Coffee. So Tom Hanks is doing something very similar to help veterans.
Yep.
So I would say check out Hank's Coffee. That's HANX for those of you who may be looking for it. Another one is Sunshine Nut Company. So this is an incredible organization that is based in Mozambique, and they have the best cashews you can ever eat. And those are available all over the country, including here in Fayetteville at some different retailers.
Yeah.
But what they do is 90% of the profits go back into helping widow and orphan care in Mozambique. It's modeled after the Milton Hershey School. And the gentleman who runs that moved to Mozambique 13 years ago. And before that, he ran the world's largest chocolate factory for Hershey. So he knows what he's doing. It's a phenomenal product. But these are other brands that I just want to give little shouts out to because they are, we're standing on each other's shoulders, right?
Yeah.
We're encouraging each other. We're cheering for each other to take some of the things that are being done and give it that extra dimension of giving back into the community to help people in need. And again, that gets back to our shared humanity of this is what we're here for, is to help one another.
Man, folks, he is Bret Raymond. He is the general manager of Neighborly, the co-founder and CEO of PacShack. He is the man on a mission to deliver 1 billion meals.
Let's go.
I'm saying 1 billion meals, right? So we still got a ways to go, but we're going to certainly push this out there into the universe so that we can go from 41 to 50 states and that we can create more awareness around Neighborly. What's the website if anybody wants to learn more about what you're doing? neighborlyfoodco.com is the website. Perfect. And we'll put a link in the show notes for that. If anybody wants to reach out to you or have any questions, I know you're a busy man, but is there a way for them to reach you on LinkedIn or
LinkedIn, through the website?
All right.
Yeah.
We'll
put
all of that in the show notes so that you can get connected with Bret. And certainly he is now a friend of the pod. So, we'll certainly figure out a way to get back with him in the near future to continue to tell this story because this is a comma. It's not a period. So
no, we turn the page and keep going, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
absolutely. Bret Raymond, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thanks,
we really
Randy.
appreciate it.
It's been delightful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, folks, that's another episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. To learn more about us or to read or download the show notes from today's episode, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. You can listen to this podcast and sign up for our free newsletter to keep up with us and all things NWA. Make sure you sign up today. You can also follow or subscribe to the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast wherever you listen to it. And please, please, please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. Remember, if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, you can also follow along by reading the transcript, which is a kind of a cool feature that Apple Podcasts offers. Our podcast comes out every Monday, rain or shine. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and we'll see you back here next week for another new episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. Peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. Check us out each and every week, available anywhere that great podcasts can be found. For show notes or more information on becoming a guest, visit iamnorthwestarkansas.com. We'll see you next week on I Am Northwest Arkansas.